The story of Real Madrid is one of relentless, ruthless, star-driven, win-at-all-costs success, dating all the way back to the 1950s with the original Los Blancos of Di Stefano and Ferenc Puskas, going into the 1980s with La Quinta del Buitre spearheaded by Butragueño and Hugo Sanchez. We would then follow up with the 2000s Galácticos, boasting the likes of Zidane, Ronaldo Nazario, Figo, Raul Gonzalez, Casillas, all these big names, which was eventually followed up by the latest and greatest Galacticos Model 2.0. You know the familiar suspects: Cristiano Ronaldo, Bale, Modric, Ramos. I could go on and on and on. But one period of time in Madridista history is often overlooked, scratched out. A time where Los Blancos were painted orange. A rare collection of talent from one nation that we have almost never seen before. This is the story of Los Oranjes. When we think of the original Galacticos, it's almost often looked at as a mythical time. A team that was almost impossible to fathom. I mean, that accumulation of superstar talent, in my opinion, has never been seen at that level before. All at once, Florentino Perez brought in the likes of Zidane, Raul Gonzalez, Ronaldo Nazario, Luis Figo, David Beckham. The names just roll off the tongue. But when you look at the silverware and the honors that that team collected in their short time together, it's almost a little underwhelming. 2 La Liga titles, and of course, the much coveted Champions League. See, while those names that I just brought up often lit up and dazzled every single stage that they were on at times, for the majority of their time together, they would often end up fizzling and burning out on the biggest of stages when it really mattered most. The proof? Just look at the European and domestic failings in that 6-year period. The reason for this was largely attributed to Perez's obsession with superstar signings, epitomized by his very own tagline, Zidane's et Pavons, a strategy intended to bring the world's greatest superstars and team them up with the academy graduates and locals. But when even greats in their own right like Claude Makélélé were sacrificed for superstars like David Beckham, it became very evident that Perez's priority for Real Madrid was not on the pitch, but off of it. Marketing had taken priority over results, as seen in Madrid's failure to win a trophy from 2004 to 2006. Perez was followed out the back door of Real Madrid by Zinedine Zidane, who subsequently announced his retirement after the Summer World Cup in 2006. And we had already seen Figo depart a few summers back, and Ronaldo Nazario, his body was just clearly giving up on him. It was very clear he was no longer the same unstoppable force we had seen in 2002 and 1998 when he dominated the world stage. And so Real Madrid entered its new era. The Galacticos were left in the past, and they badly needed a new rebuild, a breath of fresh air. In came José Ramón Calderón, the new president of Real Madrid. Now, Calderón had a very different strategy and vision for the club than Perez did. Contrary to the way Perez wanted to bring in huge signings, more so to boost the marketing of the club rather than their presence on the pitch, Calderón wanted to focus on the pitch activities. And his way of doing so was recruiting and scouting from one of the biggest footballing nations on the come-up at that point in the world, the Netherlands. When you think of the Netherlands, the club that typically comes to mind is FC Barcelona. That, of course, comes down to Johan Cruyff. For me, the single most important figure in footballing history, and one whose footballing philosophy is embedded in the roots and changed the entire landscape for FC Barcelona. That may well be the reason why we'd go on to see so many Dutch players line up for the Blaugrana to this day. From Koeman to Kluivert, and from De Jong to, well, De Jong. Real Madrid, however, they tended to look elsewhere. And in fact, in both of Perez's stints at the club, he has never, ever signed a single Dutch player for Real Madrid. Not one. So when Ruud van Nistelrooy, fresh off falling out with Sir Alex Ferguson, ended his 6-year spell at Manchester United to join Madrid, there were undoubtedly a few question marks, but for every question, Van Nistelrooy provided the answer in the only way he knew how. Goals. 33 in 47 games, to be exact. Madrid would go on to bring a few heavy hitters that summer in the form of Mahamadou Diarra, Fabio Cannavaro, Fernando Gago, Gonzalo Higuain, but none of them would provide the same instant impact as the man Madrid fans would affectionately go on to nickname Van Goal. His 25 goals in the league would fire Real Madrid to their first league title in 4 years, beating out Barcelona on the final day by head-to-head record. It was that close. However, a league title wasn't enough to save the job of Fabio Capello, as failure in Europe to beat Bayern Munich in the round of 16, coupled with the fact that Madrid fans found his playstyle bland and boring, saw Madrid look to the services of the legendary Bernd Schuster, known more for his attacking and direct style of play. But this is really where the Dutch craze at Real Madrid would begin. Bernd Schuster came to the club and immediately pointed to a lack of creativity and attacking spark in this Real Madrid team. And that summer saw three of the Netherlands' biggest young talents join Real Madrid in the form of Wesley Sneijder, Arjen Robben, and Royston Drenthe, all in the space of 12 days. In Arjen Robben, Calderon finally had the man that he had promised the Madrid faithful in his election speech that he would bring to the club. And in Wesley Sneijder, Bernd Schuster finally had the attacking creative number 10 that could be the creative hub for this new look Madrid attack that he was forming. Even Royston Drenthe at the time was considered something of a wonder kid. I mean, in that summer, he had just won Player of the Tournament at the Under-21 Euro Championship, and they had just beaten out Chelsea for his signature. Of course, we know how his story ended up. All of a sudden, one Dutchman had become four in the blink of an eye, and the quartet contributed to 37 goals and 24 assists as Real Madrid successfully defended their La Liga crown. However, they would still fall yet again in the round of 16 in Europe, this time to Roma. Unlike Capello though, Schuster would survive the subsequent summer, a summer in which Dutch football continued to shine even brighter. Despite a disappointing eventual exit to Andrei Arshavin in Russia, the Dutch took over Euro 2008 with Arjen Robben, Wesley Sneijder, and Ruud van Nistelrooy dismantling the former World Cup finalists France and Italy. But alongside Real's trio, there was a fourth Dutchman whose star was continuing to shine. Former European golden boy, Rafael van der Vaart. Now, van der Vaart was plying his trade at the time with Hamburg, and although Hamburg were making the Champions League, making the UEFA Cup here and there, it was believed, especially back in the Netherlands, that this was a club that was really below Rafael van der Vaart's talent. So when Real Madrid, after 12 days of the Euro 2008 ending, made Rafael van der Vaart their fifth Dutch signing in 3 years, the expectation was really this was the next step in his career, and that he, alongside Real Madrid's other four Dutchmen, would really be the impact and attack that could take Real Madrid back to the top of Europe. So going into the 2008-09 season, there were tons of expectation on Real Madrid, and rightfully so. However, their Dutch quintet rarely saw much action all on the pitch together at the same time. Wesley Sneijder was in and out of the team through fitness, as was Arjen Robben, but the biggest news would come in November as Ruud van Nistelrooy's season was devastatingly finished with a knee injury. No worries though, because January came and Real Madrid would go on to make their sixth Dutch signing in Ruud van Nistelrooy's heir apparent, Klaas-Jan Huntelaar. Nicknamed the Hunter, he had ripped apart the Eredivisie, most recently for Ajax, in a way that was so reminiscent of the way Van Nistelrooy had done all those years back for PSV. So who better to replace Van Gaal? Well, apparently not Huntelaar. The next 6 months saw Huntelaar appear meek and uninspiring in a Madrid team that were out of the title race by December, at their own manager's admission. Bernd Schuster came out a week before El Clasico and said there was 0% chance that his team could beat Barcelona on the weekend. And that was all the excuse that Real Madrid needed to fire him on the spot and replace him with Juan de Ramos, fresh off being sacked with Spurs. And to be fair to Ramos, he actually had a very good instant impact for the club. He kind of lit a fire underneath them, and within their first 20 games, he won 18 of them. However, their season burst into flames at the hands of Pep Guardiola's Barcelona, as we all remember the epic demolition job at the Bernabeu, 6-2 to Barcelona in a game that basically signified Barcelona and Pep's emergence as the #1 team in all of Europe. This was coupled with humiliation in, you guessed it, the round of 16, this time at the hands of Liverpool, who over 2 legs scored 5 goals, but were it not for Iker Casillas, truthfully, it could have been double that. Barcelona won a sextuple, Real Madrid went trophyless, Juan de Ramos was sacked, thus concluding the worst season in Real Madrid history, and leaving the previously mentioned Calderon with more questions than answers. In his 3-year spell at the club, yes, he had overseen 2 league titles, but add to that a constant managerial merry-go-round, his transfers largely overlapping each other when they played on the pitch together, and a failure at every single attempt to get past the round of 16 in Europe. And thus, his resignation in January of 2009 was celebrated by Madridistas worldwide more than any trophy he brought to the club. Meanwhile, the Dutch contingent were left with more questions than answers. Van Nistelrooy's career at the top seemed as good as over. Robben had really shown as much on the pitch as he did on the treatment table. Sneijder and Van der Vaart often ended up fighting for the same positions on the pitch. Huntelaar seemed out the same door that he had just walked through 6 months earlier. And Drenthe, well, he was Drenthe. However, going to the next season, all 6 of Los Oranjes were keen to stay and fight to return Real Madrid to the top. Their only problem was that Florentino Perez didn't share their same enthusiasm. Perez had returned to the helm as president, and his first order of business was erasing everything Calderon had built in his 3 years away. That meant dismantling the Dutch Six, piece by piece by piece. And so, Los Oranjes were replaced by the Galacticos 2.0. Huntelaar was kicked out for Benzema. Sneijder was kicked out for Kaká. Robben was kicked out for Cristiano Ronaldo. However, the last two would go on to have the last laugh, as they spearheaded their new clubs in Inter and Bayern respectively, all the way to the Champions League final. The irony? The final was played in the Santiago Bernabeu. Van Nistelrooy, Van der Vaart, and Drenthe would all remain at the club for another 12 months, but let's face it, it was more so to do with a lack of suitors rather than any real desire to keep them on. Sure enough, by 2011, there wasn't a single Dutch player left at Real Madrid. Perez had cleansed the club of them. Most would go on to have successful careers elsewhere, and as we know, Real Madrid didn't really miss them, as they would go on to have one of their most successful decades ever. Real Madrid haven't signed a single Dutch player since, let alone 6. It appears these days that Perez tends to prefer a Brazilian, or maybe even a Frenchman. But nonetheless, shout out Los Oranjes, man. Here for a good time. Not so much a long time. Guys, this has been your boy Lyes, another video in the books. 3 videos in 3 weeks. I told you the consistency was coming back to this channel, and I hope you have enjoyed this one a lot. Like I said, I'm trying to give you guys a new outlook on football, giving you my insight on players that I absolutely fell in love with while watching, while also bringing you guys back to a time and place where I really started watching football, and experiences and moments and teams like Los Oranjes that really defined my childhood. So if you guys have enjoyed this video, enjoyed my analysis, enjoyed my storytelling, I would really appreciate if you guys would share, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, turn the notifications on for this channel, and help me grow, man. I always say it on any channel I'm on, the channel can only grow with your guys' help, and it's as much your guys' content as it is mine. So let me know what you guys thought about this video. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. It's been your boy Lyes. Like I always say, we'll see you when we see you. Peace.